Let's start out with definition of civil liberties. It's referring to the key basic elements of our society that is necessary for democracy and for liberty really to exist. Civil liberties are personal guarantees and freedoms that the government cannot abridge. Some of those could be freedom of religion, speech, press, assembly, the right to equal treatment and due process, and the right to a fair trial could be some civil liberties that we look at. If you look at the Bill of, if you look at how our civil liberties are protected, a lot of times they're protected by court cases, they're protected by laws that protect our rights, and they're protected in the Constitution, especially in the Bill of Rights. Okay, and the Bill of Rights intent was to get the anti-federalists basically to ratify the new Constitution. A lot of people didn't like the idea of a strong central government. A lot of states probably weren't going to ratify the Constitution if it didn't have something that limited the rights and responsibilities of the national government. So in order to get it ratified, the Federalists added a Bill of Rights into the Constitution. Basically, when it's limiting the rights and responsibilities of the national government, exactly saying in the Constitution is Congress shall make no law. Okay, that's a big limitation on the national government. Congress shall make no law. Okay, that was basically solidified in the Supreme Court case Barron versus Baltimore. Okay, the intent that Congress shall make no law, and it determined due process clause in the Fifth Amendment. Barron versus Baltimore determined that the due process clause in the Fifth Amendment didn't actually apply to the states. Okay, so that was a hit to people's civil rights, civil liberties. But in that Supreme Court case, they determined due process clause in the Fifth Amendment didn't apply to the states. The change actually came with the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. Okay, and the 14th Amendment has become much more than just a Civil War amendment because of incorporation. But the 14th Amendment in Section 1 says no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of the citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Okay, so there goes an amendment, a law that says states can't do it. So in the Fifth, it was basically the national government can do it. But once the 14th Amendment came about, it is basically, given that incorporation, we call it, to the states. In Gitlow versus New York, we'll talk about incorporation here. Incorporation is basically rights that were the Bill of Rights that were applied to the states. Okay, and in Gitlow versus New York, the Supreme Court established that there are certain rights inherent in the Bill of Rights that needed to be applied to the states. Okay, and they used that using the due process clause in the 14th Amendment, that those rights had to be applied to the states. And the last case, Palco versus Connecticut, gave the United States the standard by how they incorporate those rights. It said that if a right is so fundamental that liberty would not exist without it, that the states must adhere to it. Okay, so that's how incorporation came. It was the Bill of Rights was basically the national government can do this. The national government can do this, and the states, didn't have to follow it because that's what it said in the Bill of Rights. But in using incorporation through Gitlow versus New York and Palco versus Connecticut, it gave the U.S. the standard of how to incorporate those rights to the states. Okay, by using the Due Process Clause, they did that, the 14th Amendment, they did that, and there's two components of due process. One would be substantive due process, okay, and substantive due process says a government cannot pass laws that deny you of life, liberty, and property. So no blanket denial of a right, okay? It's not like government can come out and say they ban all guns, okay? They can't take away our rights, okay? And in procedural due process, the government can limit, but must be fair and reasoned process behind it. So if you look at it, maybe gun laws could be fair and reasoned. You can't buy, automatic weapons, or you can't buy a weapon that releases more than 100 rounds in 5 seconds, type of thing. It's a lot like that with the immunization records and being able to go to school. You have to be immunized. That's basically procedural due process. Or another example, process of conviction of a crime comes from procedural due process. Okay, we're going to make another one and finish with fundamental rights and privacy rights.